Adam, let's start with the final piece of Carolina competition of the year, and that was the Tar Heels in Omaha. Carolina gets the win over Virginia on Friday. Vance Honeycutt, another walk-off hit for the Heels, but a low-scoring game. 2-1, 3-2.
3-2.
3-2, the final score in that one. And then the Tar Heels just could never really get it going offensively against Tennessee. Tennessee's very, very good. 6-1, the final there. And then Carolina gets in a big deficit against Florida State. They were down 7-1 at one point. Bring it back to 7-5, but a couple late back-to-back solo homers for Florida State gives you the final score of 9-5. So, Adam, I mean, first, let's just focus on Omaha specifically, and then we can kind of talk the year in total. But unfortunately for Carolina, I think the theme of those three games was the same. And that was the Tar Heels just couldn't get a lot of offense unless Vance Honeycutt was up to the plate. And you could probably even add in this discussion – I think you could add the Super Regional in that conversation as well, where the Tar Heels just – and we talked about it at the beginning of the postseason, how good Carolina's offense was, and the strength was really the depth of the offense. And unfortunately, that depth just wasn't there as consistently in the postseason, particularly deeper in the event compared to the rest of the year. Vance Honeycutt was – ungodly out there. I mean, he was terrific and had more home runs than anybody else in the event, at least at the time Carolina was done playing. And you always felt good with him at the plate. They just didn't have it outside of that consistently. And then the other thing, and this was more in the Tennessee and certainly the Florida State game, but I think it was consistent. Just a lot of balls, a lot of base on balls, a lot of walks. What was it, 20 walks from the Carolina pitching staff in the three games. Hit some guys, hit batters as well. And that's going to happen sometimes when you're trying to establish that inside portion of the plate. But particularly that Florida State game, Adam, it just felt like every inning felt like it started the same. And that was a first batter walk. And then all of a sudden Florida State had a guy on and nobody out, and then you were having to work to get out of it. And so a terrific year in total. And great to see Carolina back in a position to be a national contender. But those two things to me were the defining factors in Omaha and why Carolina didn't play as many games as it wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll remember this as the Vance Honeycutt postseason because he had so many big plays offensively and defensively, starting in the regional and going all the way through Omaha. And what will eventually fade from memory will be the fact that the rest of the offense really struggled. The bottom of the order really struggled. Scott Forbes tried to juggle that order against Florida State and just couldn't find the right combination. And because they were struggling, Vance Honeycutt was hitting with no one on base the vast majority of the time. At one point, he had 12 at-bats in Omaha. 9 of them had been leading off an inning.
Good gracious.
Now, he is the leadoff hitter, so we understand he's going to lead off every single game. But then you'd like to think that the order starts moving and maybe he's coming up with some teammates on base. That just never happened. And at the time that was, which I think he might have gotten one more at-bat after that. At the point in time that was, the 3 at-bats he had with runners on, he was 2 for 3 and had driven in 4 runs, I think. So there's the answer. If you could have gotten him some more at-bats with some runners on, maybe you score more runs. But the Tar Heels just couldn't score runs. And in a year that's been all about offense for college baseball, I think it's pretty accurate to say that at this point in the year, for example, Tennessee's offense is performing at a higher rate than Carolina's offense. Florida State's offense is performing at a higher rate than Carolina's offense right now. And that was just too much to overcome. The walks, like you said, it felt like the biggest swing of the time there was the 3-run homer by Tennessee after The Tar Heels had given up a hit and a walk, and then the 3-run homer. And when he hit that, it just felt like, wow, 3 runs at once? That's going to be hard to do. And the Tar Heels weren't able to do that. So I think it was a great year. It was a fairly representative performance in Omaha because I do think probably, and you'll know more by the time you hear this, but I think Tennessee's probably the best team. Carolina had the unfortunate luck to have the best team on their half of the bracket. And the best team played really well. They got a great pitching performance. Carolina little rushed at the plate maybe in some of those early innings against the Tennessee pitcher Drew Beam, but he was just pumping in strike after strike. Now, some of those strikes were because the umpire was dizzy. But I mean, credit to him. He threw strikes when he had to. So, I think the Tar Heels played to the level they've been playing in the postseason in Omaha, and that level was win 1, lose 2. Fantastic season, but not quite enough to get past what was a really good field with a lot of teams playing really well right now in the College World Series.
Yeah, Carolina was one of the best teams this year, but I don't think Carolina was the best team this year. And I think Texas A&M probably had a better squad in total. And I think Carolina and Florida State were very comparable with one another. Florida State just had a better game in the game that those two teams played. So I do think Carolina was probably in that 3 to 10 range or 4 to 10 range or whatever, as far as when it's all said and done, list the 10 best teams. I think Carolina's in somewhere in that discussion, somewhere in that group. I do think, Adam, at some point we talk, and we've talked a lot about Carolina's starting pitching. You know, the Tar Heels just didn't get a lot of really deep starts, and that bullpen has been excellent all year, and it was very good in Omaha, but it was asked to do a lot, and I think that did catch up to him some in that Florida State game. Dalton Pence had a 14-plus inning scoreless streak snapped and got knocked around a little bit, which obviously he's been terrific, particularly in the postseason. I think those injuries to Carolina's starting pitchers caught up with them a little bit in the postseason because they just weren't getting into the 7th inning with their starter, or it was a lot of maybe 4 innings from your starter and then figure it out. Now, having said that, Carolina made that work for a lot of the year, but I just think it caught up with them a little bit in Omaha. I mean, be disappointed that the season ended, but hard to be anything but impressed and congratulatory about the year for Carolina. I just think Carolina had a terrific season. They have a ton of returning talent coming back on the mound. They will have to replace a lot of pieces in the lineup and defensively, but they have some guys to build around as well. And so you would think, and I know your column after Carolina's loss to Florida State was kind of about this, is, now for Carolina the job is how do you just make this kind of the step of continuing to be a team that is in that national conversation every single year.
Yeah, I think you've fed some of your youngsters, your DeCaros and Stevensons and Gallaghers, this experience to make them want to do it again. Now, one thing Mike Fox never had to deal with is you're also going to have to deal with other schools calling those exact 3 guys.
Yeah, that's right.
And they will get calls. So that is different. I think that's the thing that feels different about 06. Otherwise, I think this year and 06 feel pretty similar. But in 06, you knew what was coming back, and you knew the core, and you knew you could develop this guy and that guy, and by next season, they'll be ready to play a bigger role. This year, you have no idea who's going to be playing what role next year because that part of the year is just beginning right now. So the Tar Heels proved to be very adept this year in getting some really impactful transfers, and not just big-name transfers like the Parks Harbor, who you get from Georgia, and you feel like, okay, you can immediately pencil him in. But D'Onofrio, Madera, from a not as marquee program, but ended up playing a marquee role on this year's team. The ability to identify players like that, I think, is what has the chance to make Carolina into a perennial contender at this level. And you're probably going to have to do that. And so that's something that the coaching staff will set out and do right now. But can't quibble with the year at all. You were the best team in the ACC the entire season long. You won the Coastal going away. You were dominant at home, which earned you the right to play at home in the postseason, and then you got the job done in the postseason.
Also, did want to mention Vance Honeycutt wins the Gold Glove for outfielders in college baseball. Well deserved. I mean, and there were some great defensive plays in Omaha, period. But Vance, I think, certainly the top outfielder defensively in the country. I've said it, I think he's the best defensive outfielder Carolina's ever had. Adam Honeycutt obviously has a year of eligibility left, but he's going to go in the first round and is going to go. I do think he is in that discussion of whoever you want. I mean, the Ackleys, the Andrew Millers, the whoever you think it is, as one of the best players. If you're going to list your all-time Tar Heel baseball team, I think Vance Honeycutt's your center fielder. Don't you?
Yes. I was thinking a lot about Dustin Ackley because he was there. I feel like, and I don't know if this is true or not, or this is just kind of how I feel about it. I feel like Dustin Ackley may be a little more consistent, but not as high a ceiling.
Yeah, didn't strike out much more contact than Honeycutt. I mean, just consistent contact. I think Honeycutt's power is better. I think Honeycutt's defense is better.
Honeycutt's speed is better.
It's hard to, if you didn't see Dustin, his ability, his contact ability was what was so elite. And so that certainly has him in the discussion. But, Adam, it would be hard. I think Vance Honeycutt is in that conversation with anybody that you want to put up against him of, hey, let's talk about who you think was the best. And I think he's certainly in that conversation.
I think you could have a conversation about best hitter, but I think if you put the whole package in there,
right?
I can't really think of anyone who played defense to the level that he does that also hits at the level that he does. And
he almost had 30 home runs this year. 30.
Yeah, and any ball hit anywhere in the vicinity of center field was an out. So in terms of most complete player, to me, that's where the discussion would probably start with him. Hitter discussion might be more complicated.
Yeah. Kyle Seager. I'm just thinking of guys who you'd be talking about.
Then you'd have to start talking about like a Chris Iannetta.
Right.
Who played a premium defensive position and was really advanced at doing that. Not as good a hitter as Vance Honeycutt.
Right.
But a consistent hitter and a long major league career.
Yeah. So, anyway, fun year. We've talked about this before. There is something about the deep baseball runs where it just captures people because there's not much else going on. The year kind of, the other team's years close, the other tournaments end, and it gets a lot of attention. I want to make sure. First of all, do you have anything else to say about Carolina baseball, Coach Forbes, anything that you want to mention before I bring this next point up?
No.